So recently I did a mastering course at Pluto, which is this amazing college that is part of the building in which the Safari HQ sits at. And we got talking about a lot of things, and I've realized that it might be beneficial for you guys to kind of go over my thought process of mastering, not as a mastering engineer, but actually as a producer or a mixing engineer, and kind of dissect how you approach processing the master and what you should and maybe shouldn't do and at what stage. My general take is you should probably actually start with having stuff on your master, and I'll tell you why. It took me years to understand. Is in the end of the day, when we're mastering, mixing, or even producing, we're essentially giving kind of our feedback on what we're hearing. When you think about it, it might be between you and yourself, but you're saying, I don't like this kick, I like this hi-hat, I like this bass sound, I want to change how the vocal sounds, something isn't fitting right here. So you're giving opinions. You're basically kind of opinionating whatever you feel is right for that song. And when you think about it a little bit further, where do these opinions come from? They come from listening to other music. If you're in a contained box and you're only listening to the songs that you're working on, you're probably giving a lot of kind of opinions that might not really be how you feel about things. And what I mean by that is, if such a big part of the process is giving opinions, then a big part of the process should also be listening to other people's music. I'm sure everybody's saying to themselves, yeah, of course I listen to other people's music. But when you think about it, a lot of times you're so excited to like sit down and start mixing or producing or mastering, you're jumping right into working on a song instead of listening to as much music as you can to get, your ears acquainted with that style of music that you're about to work on, and then jump into the song. But I think one of the biggest hurdles that people starting out usually have is, okay, I got this song that I'm gonna mix or produce. It's so far away in level than the references that I want it to sound like. What should I do? Here's kind of my steps to working this problem out. The first thing is you want to make sure that you're listening in an environment that you're comfortable in, and you want to make sure that you're listening in a comfortable volume. What I mean by comfortable volume is each person has his own kind of comfort zone. For me, it's around 90 dB SPL. That's a little loud for some people, but I stick to whatever I'm comfortable with because I want to have the opinions I have while mixing the same as while I'm listening to other people's music. So I'll stick with the same level, and usually I'll just open Spotify and look for a song that kind of fits whatever reference that I'm gonna work on for this particular song. So right now we have a really cool band called Geshem here. They're not here physically, but they're here in my DAW. And I'll play you a little snippet of the mix, and then we'll look for a cool reference. So it's kind of like this indie psychedelic rock, really, really cool stuff. Kind of references that come to mind is maybe Tame Impala. Okay, so let's say for this example that Borderline from Tame Impala is a really cool reference track that we want to use. We can't actually play it right now because of copyrights, but you could do the same thing while you're kind of trying my theory out. And what you'll find out is like it's maybe 10 or 20 dBs louder than this song that I want to work on. So the first thing I do is actually I jump to the end of the master, and I like to put an insert on the end of my master, and I'll match the gain of the reference and the song I'm working on. And please note, this is before I started mixing, right? So I do this in the beginning of the process so I can hear the reference and my song at the same level. Now, a lot of people will say, you should do the opposite, meaning you should reduce the level of the reference to hear the reference in the same level of the song that you're mixing. That doesn't really work for me because when I do that, what happens is I'm just prolonging the issues that I might encounter later in the process of mixing when I slap the master on or slap the limiter on. So my approach is I want to start with that, and then I want to mix through that so I can hear really how it would sound like in comparison to the songs that I like. And what I like to imagine is while I'm mixing, I'm kind of asking myself when I'm going between the reference and the song that I'm working on, would these fit in a playlist? Like, are they close enough to be kind of relatives? Like maybe cousins or something. Like obviously they're not going to sound the same. I'm not trying to make them sound the same. I just want them to have the same kind of level and intensity. I slapped on the Landmaster. Let's actually put it at default. And I'll just increase the gain until I get to the kind of Tame Impala level. And this really depends on the reference that you choose, but we're just using Tame Impala as an example. I didn't do any additional processing yet. I just put this Landmaster, it could be a different limiter. I just cranked up the gain. And immediately I have different opinions on what I just worked on or listened to earlier. And the reason we have different opinions when we do these things is because A, volume is a very big factor in deciding if we would like something or not. And then B, once I heard it compared to the reference, I have this kind of conversation inside myself of like, does it resemble the reference or not? How dark are my drums compared to the reference? How bright are my vocals, etc. Building this playing field where you can hear a reference and hear a mix that you're working on and kind of compare them is really the first step for any mix, if you ask me. Once I have that, then usually I'll go back to actually the first plugin in the chain, and I might EQ a few things. Once I have the level in the place where it's comparable to the reference, now I can hear the reference, and now I can have like all kind of ideas about the EQ on the master bus and what I want to do. Usually my rule of thumb, and we can get into it in a different video, if you find this interesting, please let me know and we can do a whole video about this. But my rule of thumb is, and this is something I learned from a really talented mastering engineer, I only deduct in the first kind of master bus EQ thing. I try and ask myself, pick one annoying frequency that you want to remove and just stick with that. If you have more than one that you want to kind of remove or reduce, then it's probably better if you're in a mixing stage to go up to the tracks and find a way to make them work individually or as a bus. But the reason why it's really, really important, in my opinion, to stick with one EQ dip on the master is because the master bus, in essence, obviously, is controlling everything in the song. And once you start dipping those frequencies, you're actually creating the opposite of what you want. So for example, let's say I also think that like this frequency is annoying. Usually, if you pay attention, if you listen really closely, you'll notice that what actually happens in this type of scenario is the frequencies between these two cues will be increased. So it's kind of like, instead of doing this, it's kind of like doing this. So we don't want that. What we really want is to pick one frequency that's annoying and go for that. Let's do this as an example. So. So there's this metallic sound that I don't really like, which I kind of removed with or reduced with this EQ. And there's other things that annoy me, sure, but I try and pick that one. These two are kind of my first two things that I use on the master. And then anything in between are usually kind of more, I would say, glue factors. So I might slap a compressor on, or I might put on my master console. But these are colors, right? We're not looking to solve a problem with these. We're looking to enhance what already exists with these. So let's slap on the master bus, the mastering console, and see if it adds a color. I do think compared to the reference, it felt a little too thin. So I want to add that chunk. I want to add that sauce. I want to add that flavor. So let's try and see what happens. So it gives it a little bit more meat, and it gets a little more wide because it has this mid-side processing. And this is counter most of what people talk about, but I would say try and avoid slapping on compressors to the mix bus. I usually find it kind of counterproductive. Some songs, you feel like what happens when you don't use a compressor is the limiter gets way too wild in one part of the song, and then the other part is not as loud as you want. So in those cases, I'll use a compressor. But in this example, I don't really see the need in it. If you guys like this content, let me know. We could do a whole series of mastering the mix bus. Let me know what you think in the comments. Tell me if you think I'm wrong. And yeah, be wild. I'll see you guys next time. Was it all